Every criminal trial begins with a severe power imbalance. On one side, you have the overwhelming machinery of the state, equipped with police, prosecutors, and boundless resources. On the other, a single individual facing the potential loss of their liberty. To bridge that gap, criminal jurisprudence relies on a specific procedural equalizer, the charge. It defines the exact, uncompromising boundaries of the state's accusation, limiting what the prosecution is allowed to prove. This document operationalizes Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. A citizen's right to life and liberty is protected by their right to mount a defense. But you cannot defend yourself against a vague suspicion. The formal charge solves this by providing precise notice. It locks the prosecution into a specific narrative, preventing them from ambushing the defense during trial with new theories, and ultimately creates a concrete barrier against double jeopardy. The constitutional right to a fair trial remains entirely theoretical until a precise, actionable charge is formally framed and presented to the accused in court. The complete statutory blueprint for managing these boundaries is found in Chapter 18 of the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023, spanning sections 234 through 247. While these provisions carry forward the legal mechanics of the older 1973 Code of Criminal Procedure, they maintain the foundational emphasis on procedural fairness and justice. To understand how this works, we must construct the mandatory anatomy of a valid charge. Then we will stress test that legal structure with human errors and map out the rules for joining multiple offenses into a single trial. Chapter 18 operates as a dynamic system. It balances the judicial need for efficiency with the absolute requirement to preserve the accused's right to natural justice. This blueprint represents the minimum requirements of a charge. Section 234 establishes the absolute baseline. Every single charge must explicitly state the specific offense alleged against the accused. The law allows two ways to do this. If an offense has a specific statutory name, like murder or extortion, the charge can use that name alone. If the law doesn't provide a specific name, the charge must include the full statutory definition to ensure the accused understands the allegation. Precision requires context. Section 234 mandates that the charge cite the exact law and section number under which the offense is punishable. It also must be written in the official language of the court to ensure accessibility. Once these details are framed, Section 234 subsection 5 introduces a powerful legal presumption. The very existence of this written charge implies that the prosecution has fulfilled all legal conditions and accounted for any general exceptions required by the Bharatiya Nagarik Sanhita. If the state intends to seek an enhanced punishment based on the accused's previous criminal record, Section 234 subsection 7 requires the exact date and place of that prior conviction to be clearly stated up front. Now we move from the legal definition to the physical reality. Section 235 requires the charge to specify the exact parameters of the act, the time it happened, the place it occurred, the person affected, and the specific property involved. There is a practical exception. For crimes involving criminal breach of trust or misappropriation of money, investigators often can't pinpoint exact theft dates. In these specific cases, stating the gross sum taken over a maximum period of 1 year is legally sufficient. But standard details aren't always enough. Section 236 acts as a failsafe. If stating the time, place, and person still doesn't give the accused reasonable notice, for instance, in a complex case of cheating or giving false evidence, the charge must explicitly detail the manner in which the offense was committed. Sections 234 through 236 establish a mandatory baseline of information. They ensure the accused is equipped to mount a defense, eliminating the risk of a prosecutorial ambush in the courtroom. But trials are conducted by humans, and human error is inevitable. What happens to the state's case if this carefully constructed charge contains a typographical error, cites the wrong section number, or omits a crucial date? This decision tree illustrates Section 238, known in criminal jurisprudence as the doctrine of curable irregularity. It establishes that technical errors do not automatically destroy the prosecution's case. For an error to actually vitiate the trial, it must fail a strict two-pronged legal test. The defect must have genuinely misled the accused, and that confusion must have resulted in an actual failure of justice. This doctrine relies heavily on the Supreme Court precedent Willie Slaney v. State of Madhya Pradesh. The court determined substance always prevails over procedural technicalities. If the accused properly understood the case against them, a minor defect in the paperwork cannot invalidate a conviction. To address these errors actively, Section 239 grants criminal courts the power to alter, add to, or amend any charge at any time before the final judgment is pronounced. However, this power comes with a mandatory safeguard. The judge must read and explain the altered charge to the accused. The court then applies a test of prejudice to decide whether continuing the trial immediately would harm the defense, or if the trial requires an adjournment. If the charge is altered, Section 240 ensures that both the defense and the prosecution retain the right to recall and re-examine witnesses to address the newly introduced facts. Through Sections 238 to 240, the Bnss creates a resilient trial environment. It protects the legal process from collapsing over minor clerical defects, while enforcing absolute guardrails against any actual prejudice to the defense. Now we must look at how the law organizes complex trials. This diagram shows the default firewall under Section 241. Every distinct offense requires a completely separate charge and must be tried in a completely separate trial. This mandatory severance prevents judicial confusion, stopping the court from unfairly aggregating unrelated accusations to form a bias against the defendant. But holding dozens of separate trials for connected crimes would paralyze the courts. Section 242 introduces an efficiency exception. If an individual commits up to 5 offenses of the same kind within a 12-month window, they can be joined into a single trial. Section 243 creates the same transaction rule. This allows multiple different offenses to be joined together in one trial, provided they were committed during a single continuous series of events. To define what makes a same transaction, the Supreme Court outlined a precise test in State of AP v. Chimalapati Ganeshwara Rao. The events must share a continuity of action, proximity of time, and unity of purpose. When the physical facts of a crime are clear but the exact legal category is ambiguous, say whether a theft was actually extortion, Section 244 permits the court to frame alternative charges, allowing the evidence to dictate the final conviction. Taking this further, Section 245 states that an accused charged with a major offense can legally be convicted of a minor included offense, even if that minor offense was never separately charged. The Supreme Court confirmed this mechanism in Dalbir Singh. Finally, Section 246 extends these joinder principles to multiple persons.